Not sleeping, rage, blood clots, exhausted. These are signs that your hormones are most likely off. In this video, we're going to talk about your postpartum hormones and how you can start to balance them naturally. I've helped hundreds of women heal heart palpitations, insomnia, rage, dipped moods, and anxiety for over a decade now. And today we're diving into hormones. I also have a blog post that aligns with this, so make sure you read that below to get every single detail out of the video. So what hormones are we talking about? In the postpartum time, your estrogen and progesterone are starting to level out. Now, of course, it depends if you're breastfeeding or not breastfeeding, because this absolutely affects how you feel in the symptoms that you're going through. So in a general term, we're talking about estrogen, progesterone, cortisol rises in the postpartum time, especially if you're sleep deprived and have the MTHFR gene. And then last, your thyroid, which can go hyper to hypothyroid 3 to 6 months after you have a child. So that means your thyroid can be high, you could have weight loss and lots of energy, and then it can go low where you have constipation and weight gain. Does this sound familiar? This happened to me. So the thyroid goes all over the place, right? So your goal to the best of your ability is to eat as clean as you can. Now I know it's a hard time for you, you're very busy raising children, potentially breastfeeding, but your diet is really the key to all of this. We want to eat as clean as we can with lots of protein and vegetables so that we're really supporting ourselves in this time of change. So keep that in mind, diet is always first. So let's dive into the hormones and your symptoms, and maybe take a piece of paper and a pen out and note where you feel your symptoms are at this time. Keep in mind you could have all of these hormones out of whack too. Now this is something I help my clients with within the Present Mama online course, but if you're overwhelmed and wondering where to start, make sure you download the Postpartum Recovery Roadmap so you can start with the first steps toward taking care of your health and healing anxiety naturally. So the biggest thing I see in the postpartum time is low progesterone. So your progesterone tends to drop, which is normal, and has a hard time coming back up in the postpartum time, especially if you're estrogen dominant, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So if your estrogen is too high, you can't even use your progesterone, if that makes sense, right? But if your estrogen is where it should be, you should be able to use that progesterone. So high estrogen and low progesterone go hand in hand. Signs of low progesterone, and I'll put an image up so you can check off which ones sound like you. No ovulation, heavy periods, long menstrual cycle, short luteal phase, which is ovulation to menstruation, so day 14 to day 28, anxiety, depression, PMS, constipation, breast pain. Cyclic breast pain means that the breast pain comes and then goes, it's not consistent. Low basal temperature, endometriosis, fertility problems, insomnia, miscarriages, spotting in the second half of your cycle. So I'd say the key signs of low progesterone tend to pop up day 14 to day 28 and can be constipation and insomnia along with blood clots as well. So keep in mind to track your cycle, day 1 is when you first start bleeding. Around day 14 you should have ovulation. Now it can be 14, 15, 16. And then after ovulation, you may find that you're struggling with sleep. And then when your menses come, your period comes, you may find that you're exhausted and have blood clots. So these would be a key cycle of low progesterone. Let's talk about excessive estrogen, because the two sort of go hand in hand. It's also called estrogen dominance. So again, you have that cyclic breast tenderness. So the breast tenderness tends to come and go, or it could last a while, especially if you're consuming foods that are increasing your estrogen, like a lot of soy. So if you're consuming a lot of soy or estrogen-like herbs, then you might be getting breast pain a lot because you're not eliminating it. So work on elimination or reducing constipation if you have breast pain. Migraines, heavy periods, hot flashes, fibroids, mood swings, depression, anxiety, gallbladder problems, and a history of using birth control, and a pear-shaped body. So again, we're going to talk about remedies coming up, but it tends to be this high estrogen and low progesterone go hand in hand. Now, it's very uncommon that we would have high progesterone. Just keep that in mind. So then we have low estrogen, and your hormones change throughout your cycle. So throughout the month, you can have a little bit of each of this, especially when you get towards perimenopause. So you can have signs of low estrogen and then high estrogen within 30 days. That's why our PMS is so crazy. So the key indicator, I'll put up an image here, but the key indicator of low estrogen tends to be dryness in the vaginal region, which can cause frequent UTIs, also brain fog and brain poor focus, like mom brain they call it, can be a true sign of not enough estrogen. Sex also may be painful due to vulval vaginal dryness. So we can have periods of time that we have low estrogen. All right, cortisol. Signs of high cortisol. Keep in mind, you can also have low cortisol and high cortisone, it's called. So one of the tests that you could do when you're done breastfeeding, I would say at least 2 years postpartum, is the Dutch hormone test. Because it does show you your estradiol, your estrogen, your progesterone, your cortisol levels, and it gives you a lot of feedback into your hormones. It's a urine test. So you take it over, I think, 48 hours, and then you can adjust accordingly. For example, I was getting extreme exhaustion at 3 p.m. What was happening was my cortisol was dropping. So one of the biggest mistakes we make as moms, and I did this as well, is we wake up and have coffee. That's it. Wake up and have coffee. We don't even have food, we don't have water, we don't have anything, just coffee. And that was one of the biggest mistakes I made because it was affecting my hormones. So now I try to wait 1 hour, hopefully 2 hours, and I have food with my coffee. I've also changed the cream. I no longer consume dairy in the morning in my coffee. So I actually prefer a latte with almond milk or cashew milk as the coffee in my morning. But keep in mind that coffee with no food is absolutely affecting your hormones. So your cortisol could be high, but it also could be low. So there's a lot of information online now about high cortisol. Just keep in mind that it's possible you have low cortisol. So signs of high cortisol: high blood sugar, high blood pressure, stretch marks, excessive hair growth, brain fog, sleep disturbance, intestinal problems, low libido, and muscle pain. But low cortisol can look like extreme exhaustion. So I actually was taking licorice root, which raises blood pressure, at 3 p.m. because every single day I was getting exhausted. And that finally went away, but it was consistent for many, many years. So high cortisol or low cortisol can show up in different ways. Just keep that in mind. One quick way to know about your cortisol is Thorne. They have a test that is a saliva test, I believe. I'll leave a link below and you can see where your cortisol levels are. Let's talk about thyroid. So your thyroid can go hypo to hyperthyroid. Signs of hyperthyroidism: you tend to have diarrhea, exercise intolerance, maybe a goiter, hair loss, heart palpitations, heat intolerance, increased appetite, nervousness, personality changes, fast heart rate, and bulging of the eyes. So hyperthyroid is when your TSH is below 1.5. Now, it's very common that we have a hyperthyroid and we have a lot of energy. So we think, okay, this is great. I'm losing weight. I can't stop. But eventually you crash and burn. So hypothyroidism is the opposite. You tend to gain weight, have constipation, cold hands and feet, depression, really dry skin and hair, hoarse voice, slow heart rate, and funny enough, you might be missing the outer third of your eyebrows. So these are the signs of hypothyroidism. So what can we do about these hormones? So the first step in healing is to clean up your diet. And we talked about this in the beginning, but really make sure that you're consuming healthy proteins, fish, wild-caught fish, vegetables, fruit, whole grains. So don't forget that you need whole grains. And just really cleaning up your diet and consuming lots of teas. You typically know what your body needs. One quick way to know what foods work for you is to look up the blood type diet, number one, or an Ayurvedic diet. So Ayurvedic diet has really helped guide me for over a decade. As a Vata, which means that we tend to be a little thinner or medium build and tend to struggle with constipation and anxiety, tend to be cold a lot. As a Vata body type, we really like, if you're like me, we really like cooked grains like oatmeal, high fiber of course, and cooked foods over raw foods, which would be more of a Pitta diet. So looking up the Ayurvedic body type or dosha and their diet can be really helpful to help guide you what foods are best for your body. Last week, we also talked about cleaning up your environment. So cleaning up the toxins in your environment, the toxins in your foods, if possible, in your makeups, in your cleaning products, because this raises estrogens in the body and it's stored in our fat, which is why women struggle more than men with the hormones fluctuating all over the place. So cleaning up your environment, your air, if you can add an air filter, a water filter, those are the two places I would start if you're struggling with your health. So cleaning up your environment with chemicals, with non-toxic chemicals, making sure you're you're going to the bathroom 2 to 3 times a day, making sure that sleep is a priority, and then not consuming coffee on its own. Those are really the key pieces for good hormone health. I have more in the blog post below. But let's go over some tips for if you're struggling with these particular hormone challenges. So we started with low progesterone, right? The number one botanical for low progesterone is Vitex chasteberry. But it doesn't come without warning. So I was told by a doctor to take 5 milliliters of Vitex chasteberry in the morning before any food or anything to help with depression. But I didn't have enough estrogen, and that is the one piece of using Vitex chasteberry you want to be careful with. Because if you don't have enough estrogen in the postpartum time and you take Vitex chasteberry, it makes your depression worse. So just keep in mind that you can try Vitex chasteberry maybe in a blended formula with other herbs or on its own, but watch for excessive depression and then stop consuming it if you experience that. Additionally, you can look at shatavari as a botanical to help balance your hormones in the postpartum time, and that's considered safe while breastfeeding. Now, excessive estrogen, if you have excessive estrogen, you want to support your liver. You can try this liver flush, which includes carrots, beets, celery, and lemon 3 times a week. So if you're feeling breast tenderness or if this is happening the week before your period, You might consume this liver flushing juice several times a week and really see if you can improve elimination, going to the bathroom, aka pooping, 2 to 3 times a day, and consider consuming ground flax seeds, less than a tablespoon, in your daily diet to help with elimination. So when it comes to high estrogens, I would be curious to know what you're consuming for your diet. The number one thing I would remove is dairy. I would be curious to know what products you're using to clean your house and where you live and how many chemicals you're exposed to. For example, if you live in mold, it raises your estrogen enormously. So that was something else I've experienced. I love sharing all of my challenges with you. So high estrogen, we want to focus on elimination and what's going on in our environment, as well as supporting the liver. Supporting the liver is huge. Okay, low estrogen. What do you do for low estrogen? Well, you mostly feel it in the vulva region and in your bottom. So it becomes extremely dry and irritated. So your goal is to keep that area lubricated. One way you can do that is by inserting a glycerin suppository nightly. Now, Bonafide is one that I've been using personally. I'll leave a link below. I think you get $15 off if you join then. But it is made with glycerin. I believe it's safe if you're breastfeeding. We should double check that though. And that could bring extreme comfort to you while you learn how to adjust your hormones. Additionally, maca, women are using maca to help raise their estrogen levels. And you read in my blog post below that it's not that it raises estrogen levels, it actually is filled with iodine and minerals. So it's possible that it's supporting the thyroid, which is helping bring relief for symptoms. So just keep that in mind that if your thyroid is off, be careful with maca. All right, if you're struggling with high cortisol, keep in mind that you want the adaptogen plus nervine formula. So you want to think about herbs like ashwagandha, depending on your thyroid, maybe rhodiola if you don't have bipolar, and passion flower. So we're looking at adaptogens plus nervines to stay calm. If your cortisol is low, you want to consider licorice, but keep in mind it raises your blood pressure, so just use that with caution. So herbs for hyperthyroidism include motherwort, lemon balm, and nettles. You may feel better if you avoid ashwagandha, so just keep that in mind. And hypothyroidism includes ashwagandha, licorice, nettles, reishi, and ginger along with others. So there's many herbs you can take to support your thyroid in the postpartum time, along with iodine and selenium, depending on where your thyroid is. I go over this in great detail within the Present Mama online course, and it's a little bit too much to keep adding in here, but keep in mind there's a lot you can do to support your thyroid and your symptoms after birth to bring everything back to level so you're feeling like yourself again. Don't forget, if you're struggling with your postpartum symptoms, make sure you grab the Postpartum Recovery Roadmap so you can take the first steps to start healing your body naturally. Now, your hormones are one piece of the puzzle that is causing insomnia. So make sure you watch next week's video where we're talking about the one hormone that causes insomnia and how you can start sleeping again naturally. See you then.